Well, speaking of solving problems here at the workshop that happens every Tuesday at the Thinker Growth Community with our fa- uh, faculty members present, the topic for today is customer service. And here's why I think it's a good topic. Number one, I think companies do a bad job with customer service. And sometimes the more systematized their customer service becomes, the worse job they do. Uh, and so I'll begin with a bit of a story and contrast that real quickly with another story. So I have these security cameras from Wise. I bought them in 2021, and there was a firmware update. Bought them in July 2021. There was a firmware update in the end of December 2021, and the base station was bricked. The firmware update was no good. They immediately stopped sending out the firmware updates and said contact support. I did through their app, and I sent them a log file. And then I waited. And a month or so later, they came out with another firmware update. It didn't work. I waited. They came out with a firmware update in April of 2022. Didn't work. And then I sort of forgot about it until the other day when I was like, I need security cameras. And so I contacted Wise back, and they said, we have no record of you sending us anything. But thanks for being a Wise customer. We'll give you $20 and a gift card so you can buy a new base station because we don't make that base station anymore. And yada, yada. So I sent them back the evidence that I sent a log file. I sent them screenshots. I sent them receipts that I was paying for their Camera Plus subscription without having access to my cameras. And they are stuck on the fact that there's no record that the log file that was sent had to do with connectivity issues, even though it says, that there was like the firmware update. And I was like, well, here's my reasoning for why this is a bad idea for you to just send me $20. I think you should send me a new base station because it was your firmware update that stopped my system from working. So I'm now waiting to hear back on whether they're going to send me a new base station. And I told them in all outcomes, whether you send me $20, a new base station, or you do nothing, I'm going to talk about it on the community for entrepreneurs. I'm going to put it out on LinkedIn. I'm going to put it out on TikTok. There's 16,000 followers between all of those. And I will add it to the keynote that I gave for the Better Business Bureau when I talked about Apple and how Apple stood behind their products even when they didn't have to because of a problem that they had created, despite the product being out of warranty. So I said, you have an opportunity to make me a lifelong customer or I will permanently leave Wise forever. Plus, that base station probably only costs you $20. You could just send me a new one because I could buy a base station and a camera for $80 on Amazon. And I said, by the way, I'd leave a review on Amazon about this whole situation. So now I'm waiting to hear back. Dun, dun, dun.
Doesn't sound like they made it a huge priority, at least in the first go round. And maybe they won't this time either. Who knows?
So customer service. When do you stand behind your products? How do you develop these processes and systems to encourage lifelong customers in this perhaps gray area where it's out of warranty, but the original update, the original breaking of the system was your issue? What would you do and why?
So as in like the breaking of the system happened because of you, or it was an issue to you?
It was an issue.
Was there?
The company's update broke the camera system.
Right. Mm.
So, and the question is, if I was in charge of that company, how would I tell the company to respond to the client complaint?
Yeah. How do you deal with these types of issues when it's not black and white?
I think
Yeah.
there should be like a cap. Sorry, what were you going to say, Paul? Thank you for
No,
saying.
I'm thinking about it because there's a very simple reflexive answer,
Mhm.
but it's not. It's an ethical issue that I think it feels like we're getting into here because
What's your reflex? What's your reflex say?
my reflex is keep customers happy because happy customers continue to spend money with you.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
like, I'll just take from my business, right? Um, we have never missed a deadline, but one time, with one of our longest standing clients, I forget exactly what happened. We published on time, but we published like the wrong article or something like that. Or there were issues, glitches with the um, imagery that they asked us to attach to the article that we published for them. And they brought it to our attention. They weren't upset about it at all. They were just like, "Can we just get it fixed?" And I said, "We'll get it fixed, and I'm not charging you for the next article we write. I'll eat the cost." Because I'm like, I don't like, I don't ever want to think of my clients as easy money, but people who are just in the habit of spending money with you, it's over time, it's easy to sort of just let that automate and drift apart. And then you kind of get blindsided one day when they cancel on you. Well, my attitude was, okay, that can still happen, but I'm going to put up every possible roadblock I can to them thinking that our relationship is purely transactional. And one of the ways you do that is by saying, if there's a problem, not only am I going to fix it, I'm not going to charge. I'm going to give you a freebie. The reason I know this works, part of the reason, is that I've had companies do that with me too. And so a couple of years ago, this is actually something I did. I called long distance to my dad, who was living in the Philippines, on my cell phone. Now, when we were all kids, we all knew that was a long distance charge. Nowadays, they sort of blend together and you don't think about it until much later. At least I didn't. And so this charge showed up on our bill. We're T-Mobile subscribers. This charge showed up. It was quite substantial. And my bride said to me, "We need to find out what this is. This doesn't look right." And I didn't remember making the call and I didn't associate it. So I just called up T-Mobile and I said, "Did something happen? Did I not get the memo? What's going on here?" And they said, "Oh, Mr. Edwards, it looks like on this day you made a call to the Philippines." And I'm like, "Oh, shoot, of course. I called my dad." I said, "Well, never mind. It's my fault. I just wasn't paying attention." They said, No, that's okay. We're gonna scrub the charge." And I said, "What are you going to scrub the charge? I made the call." And they said, No. You've been a T-Mobile customer for like 10 years now. It happens all the time. You know what? We'll broom it. Forget about it. No big deal." And I said, "Well, then I'm not leaving anytime soon." So that's my elongated answer of my reflexive answer, my reflexive response.
Yeah, it's good stuff. What about you, Naomi? You're going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I went logical first. Not that that's not logical. I went to like the unempathetic. Well, I went to, there should be a cap on like cost effectiveness because yes, every company makes profit, but I mean, if someone's wanting something ridiculous that wouldn't make sense to the company to do back, it just would not be beneficial and it would be a really bad business call because then you're looking at people wanting to just walk on you. Um, but I really think that if it's not something that's going to break the company, why not? Why not? Because like you said, like happy customers are going to be permanent customers. They're going to be customers with you as long as they can, as long as they are able to. So, I think there should be a cap, but other than that, like, I think that it's kind of like it costs nothing to be nice. It's kind of like that sense where it doesn't make sense when people go out of their way to be unkind to other people just because it takes so much more effort to get someone to think that you don't like them or to make someone feel like negative. That takes so much more effort than to just be like, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" When someone was cruel to you before, like, why let that fester? It's almost like a poison to yourself. I see that in like a company sense too with customer service. Like, if it's not gonna put you out and it's just gonna be a positive experience, you're gonna walk away with your customer feeling valued, and they'll value you in turn. And hey, you might get more customers out of it because they're gonna tell their friends their experience with you. So why not? It's contagious.
Yeah.
Ryan, what do you
Anything-
say?
Yeah. Anything to add?
I agree with both of you. I think I agree with the group here. At the end of the day, it's all about taking care of the customer. That's how you make your reputation. That's how you'll it's how you'll keep a customer, as well as potentially through word of mouth, get new customers. I think to Naomi's point, it takes much more effort as a company to make a customer dissatisfied with you, when the fix is rather simple. I mean, in the case that you were saying, Jason, like, you can give me $20 or give me the equipment that's worth $20. And if so, I can make it worth your while in telling my friends in in my circle. And if not, I can also tell my friends in my entire circle. And, through a decision that's ultimately worth, X amount of money to a company, that could be, um, what's the word? Invaluable for a company to be able to keep that customer, as well as potentially take on new customers, just based on a simple decision of taking care of the customer rather than not.
Yeah. Well, I think, as I was reasoning this, the example that came to my mind was I had had an Apple laptop, which ended up with a weird graphics card problem. And a little bit of research indicated that there was a problem with the welding on the graphics card, or the soldering rather, on the graphics card. That it would become too hot. The soldering would start to melt. Graphics card would shift, and eventually your computer's dead. And this was a known issue. People were talking about it online, but Apple famously never has any problems with their computers, even when they do. And uh, and so I posted about it on Facebook, and a friend of mine randomly responded to me and said, you need to email Apple. I had the same problem. They fixed it. So I did. I emailed Apple, and I was out of warranty. I had never bought an extended warranty. It was the first Apple laptop I think I had ever purchased, and I'd purchased some other Apple products. Um, and the response I got back was, "Hey, we're sorry you're having this problem. We should probably talk on the phone." And I got a call from some person at Apple saying, "So sorry you're having this problem. What we're going to do?" She wasn't like, "Hey, what do you want? Tell me about it." She's like, "What we're going to do is we're going to send you a box, put your laptop in that box, uh, and then give it to UPS. They'll send it to us. We'll have it back to you in 3 days." And I was like, "I'm not in warranty." She says, "It doesn't matter. We're going to take care of that." And I got it back, and they'd replaced the keyboard, which they didn't have to do. They replaced the motherboard. They replaced something else. They just went through it and like scrubbed the whole thing, put my drive back in it, and I got my computer back like new. But they had a system to deal with a known issue in a way that now I know Apple will stand behind their products. Even when I'm past the line. Whereas, so Apple made me a lifelong customer with that. They're going to have to really screw up royally for me to be like, "Oh, maybe I should consider something else." Because there's no reason not to. And Wise now, the only reason I started getting my cameras back, tried to figure out if I could get my camera working again, was I should see what their options are for security cameras. And they've got a cool new security camera, which I'd like to use, but I will 100% not use it if I'm going to have to buy $300 of cameras again, because my little plastic nothing of a little base station is broken because of your firmware update. So it is essentially, so I could buy the base station. So from a value standpoint, so here's what's processing in my head. From the value standpoint, Apple probably spent hundreds of dollars. Yeah, they would have spent hundreds of dollars overnighting product, fixing it, sending it back to me for a laptop that I could have at the time probably replaced for $2,000. Wise, I could buy a new camera and base station for $80 on Amazon. Or Wise will give me $20 for their store. Or you could, for probably $5 plus shipping, ship me this new plastic case with this tiny little nothing of a firmware in there that I already have to put my own memory chip in there. I already have the software. I pay for it. So it seems like from a value standpoint, why sacrifice the long-term value of me? And like you talk about, all of the people that I will 100% tell about my experience. And I'll be forthright, I'm out of warranty and all this other stuff, but there's why sacrifice that with some line of like $20. It's like, okay, that board didn't cost you $20. Just
That
send me a new one.
and how much less time would they be spending just making it right? Like
Right.
they're literally using up more of their time, more of their resources, more of their employee time by halting this, extending this back and forth with you, just not willing to make it right. They're literally using more of their time in order to try and get you to tell you no, but get you to not be mad about them telling you no. It just doesn't make sense.
Inefficiency is a hallmark of bureaucracy.
Mm.
But it's not limited to bureaucracies. I mean, small businesses can be inefficient too, and they can be very dumb about the way they go about things. I don't know if this is the best example of it. It's just the one that comes to mind, and I'm not going to name the company because they're not here to defend themselves. But I will tell you that it's a large financial institution everybody would know. Now, it's not the one that I do business with, but it was the one my father did business with before he passed. And as a result, the laws of the land are that even if you have a family trust and will, as I did, when an account holder dies, the beneficiary on that account is the one who can receive the funds. Well, Dad had not updated the beneficiary, so it still listed my mom, who had died 8 years earlier. So I had to go through a process, which I sort of anticipated because I knew that rule going into it. And I'm like, I bet he didn't do that. And as soon as I tried to get this bank to send me the proceeds of his estate, even though I had the will, they couldn't do it. They said, Mr. Edwards, we're prevented by law. You're going to have to submit all these documents. You're going to have to go through probate anyway, which Dad had set up the estate plan so I wouldn't have to go through probate. Now I had to go through probate anyway. So I call my attorney and I get that process going. And basically, I have to come back with these documents from the court called letters testamentary that, instruct the financial institution, this is the correct beneficiary. According to the law, you must send them his funds. Okay, fine. Well, then they hit another snafu. And this one was because Mom did not die in the United States. She died in Canada. The United States and Canada do not have a reciprocal agreement for death certificates, which meant I had to get a signed, stamped death certificate from the government of British Columbia, which took another several weeks and fees and bureaucrats and all that. And I finally got all that documentation to them. So now I have the letters testamentary proving I'm the heir. I have the legitimized, signed, stamped death certificate from my mom. to satisfy that requirement. And the person I'm talking to on the other line says, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Edwards, we need one from the national Canadian government, not the provincial one of British Columbia. And I said, you got to be kidding me. This was the point. I had done all this work over the course of about 6 months. And now he's telling me he wants one. And the Canadian government doesn't issue them, by the way. They do the same thing. You don't get a death certificate from the federal government of the United States when you die. You get one from the state in which you die, right? And all this was information available on a Google search, right? You don't have to be a lawyer or, but the guy, the reason I'm not attacking him is because I don't know if he knew this or not, but he didn't want to use his brain and say, hold on a minute, let me go check with a superior. Let me go research this. He just like, it's almost like he was paid, as you said, Naomi, to be difficult and then hope that I wouldn't be upset, which I'm like, at this point, there's no way I'm not getting upset. So I get off the phone with him. I called my lawyer. My lawyer said, wrong answer, pal. Send him an email and let him know the Canadian government does not issue death certificates. So you can't produce what he's looking for. And I did. And then about a half an hour after that, the phone rings. He goes, Mr. Edwards, we're prepared to make a one-time exception. And I'm like, you're not making a one-time. Well, I didn't say that. I'm like, okay, fine. And they finally sent me the money. It's not worth it to me to, as you said, Naomi, it's not worth it to me to spend that much time and that much money upsetting people and then trying to make them not feel upset. It's better just to use your brain.
And then on top of that, the refusal to admit they did something wrong, the refusal to admit, oh, you know what? Oh, you're right. Sorry about that. They have to. Some companies are very stuck in making sure the customer feels like the company is superior to them. So
yes,
we're ready to make a one-time exception. That was like,
Yeah.
It's not an exception. It's not an exception. You made a mistake. You can't be willing to say you made a mistake, and you have to make me feel small because you will not be told that you did something wrong. Are you serious? And that'll rub people the wrong way too. Like, people can tell, people who are doing business with you, they will be able to tell if you are so stuck on your high horse that you cannot be at their level and meet them where they are at. If you have to maintain that level of superiority over them because they're your customer and you're the company, they're needing something from you. When those lines are built so heavy that the customer has to be kept at arm's length, they're not going to feel like the company cares. They're just not, ever. So that was the most irking thing about that story is, we're willing to make a one-time exception. After all that, really, you can't admit that you did something wrong.
Fortunately, by that time, Naomi, I had already blown my top. So I had come back to the center and could hold my tongue as he told me that. But if that had been the break point, I might have let loose on him. It was getting beyond ridiculous, especially with all the effort I'd done and the patience I'd shown. I'd never lost my temper at him all through that. The law is the law. I'm blaming a company for following the law, but I am going to hold somebody accountable for not using their brain.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the challenges that companies experience, and we all experience this, is who is to be believed. So, my storyline for this company, is all truthful. But other people are not being truthful with them and trying to get free product for nothing, and so it's hard to parse out from a system standpoint. How do you create a system that determines whether somebody's truthful or not? And so, they were looking for a customer support chat, which I never had, partially because I'm a programmer. I've, worked in an e-commerce company that I owned programming stuff, and people would say, hey, this thing's broken. And I wanted to hit them in the face and say, I know, I've been working on it. Stop telling me it's broken. I already know it's broken. And you telling me it's broken isn't helping anything. So I projected that sort of I turned it into patience with this company and said, well, I'm not gonna pester you guys. It's not gonna speed anything up. Your customer
Yeah.
support rep's going to go, hey, we got another person who's having the issue. They know they're having the issue. That's why they stopped the firmware update. And so I went quiet, which then didn't create the paper trail that they want to have, to
Yes.
say that somehow, I had to extend myself for the issue. So my credibility is in question because I chose to stay quiet. And yet and even now, I wrote this email and I'm feeling like I'm super confrontational over this because I there's very clear at the end in all outcomes. I was like, so here's the facts of the matter. So what I'm asking for is this, and in all outcomes, whatever you choose, here's the steps I'm going to take. And I was like, wow, that's really confrontational. I'm just trying to be clear that I will absolutely, I'm not hiding it from you. I'm going to tell people about this experience, positive or negative,
Yeah.
because I think it's a valuable experience. Other people can learn from this. And so I think sometimes we try, maybe companies aren't sure who to believe and they need facts. That's one level. The second level is, under those facts, what steps do we take? Under what conditions? How much can we spend? How much is worth it to spend to keep that customer? And then the next part of it is maybe the things that we might deal with as individuals of, when am I being a pest? And when am I pressing too hard to get
Yeah.
the outcome that I'm looking for? And when do I just give up and go, forget it?
And what
You
are
know?
the expectations that you can legitimately have, right, of working with? I've heard this expression. I don't necessarily fully agree with it, but it does happen, right? There's probably a pretty high concentration of people who are what some have called minimum wage in a gilded cage,
Mm.
right? They basically are getting paid next to nothing to do all this, very, very elemental type of work.
Yeah.
That to you, like to us as business owners, like it's paramount stuff, right? So when I call the customer service line, I'm always disappointed because I'm dealing with people who don't own the company they work for, first and foremost. So they're not going to have a sense of ownership of my problem. They're going to view it as, many of them view it as an imposition on their time playing solitaire, you know? And I just so how do you manage your expectations as a customer? But then like as a business owner, now I think of that, like, what are my customers' expectations and how do I surprise them? How do I maybe show them that they've not to prove a point, but just to show them, there's a better quality of service available. And you're used to being, and I mean, I'm in publishing and ghostwriting, right? I get complaints all the time. Well, they said they were going to do this and they told me they were going to do that. And then this didn't happen and that didn't happen. And how do you make sure you deliver on those things so that you help that customer rehabilitate their expectations of the service you provide?
Yeah, I think if I compare and contrast the Apple interaction with the Wise interaction, Apple had a process, 100% had that process nailed for surprising the customer and without having the customer ask for the outcome. Apple knew the outcome. We're going to get you a computer that works. That's the outcome. You don't have to ask to be escalated. We're not going to hassle you. One of the great things they did is they asked for a phone call. Why? 70% of your communication is in nonverbal. It's your tone. You don't know if I'm
Mhm.
frustrated or not through an email.
Yep.
Wise, the first thing they did, I went through the online chat. The first thing they did after I said, here's the things, and here's a screenshot and whatnot, they said, we need to take this to email. And boom, now I'm in an email back and forth for the entire weekend with somebody who is repeating. I'm getting this like repeated. Well, as a valued customer of Wise, we're prepared to offer you $20. It's just like,
Yeah.
okay, you don't understand the situation. I'm repeating myself now, and I'm now asking for the escalation. And I already told her that, like, $20, we've spent more than $20 between your interaction and my interaction on this thing. You should have just sent this to me by now.
You know what
But
that's making
no,
sorry, Jason, you know what that's
yeah,
making me think of is when you call
what's that?
again, I hate to pick on financial institutions, but this is how they do it, right? The most of them is that you call, you're on the automated hold line. Please enter your account number. You enter your account number, right? And then they pick up they finally get through to a person and they say, "Would you please give me your account number?" I've many times I've felt
Yes.
tempted to say, "I already gave it to you. If you can't read, that's your problem."
Yeah.
They ask you for the same information you've already given them and that
Yeah.
they already have and that they know because I mean, look, I've worked in a call center, right? You can see the phone number when it comes up. You can see who the client is. It immediately auto-populates it in the screen. This is 20 years ago it was doing it for us. It was auto-populating the account number, the information, the name of the customer. It's like, you're asking me for information you already have. It's frustrating. Anyway, sorry,
Yeah.
I interrupted your train of thought there. I just
No,
wanted to
I was done with that train of thought. I just Apple has a process in place,
Mhm.
and they want to talk to you about it as a human, person to person. Wise has a process in place, and it's how automated can we make this,
Yeah.
and how cheap can we make this interaction versus how fantastic can we solve the problem, or fantastically can we solve it.
Well, it goes into like again with that superiority from the company. There's a certain amount of gaslighting you have to do. Like that message you got on repeat from them. As a valued customer, we are committed to making sure that we take care of you. No, they're not. No, they're not. But they're going to repeat that and hammer it into your head until you feel crazy for wanting something that's absolutely reasonable to want and feel entitled to. It's absolutely reasonable to feel like that should be resolved in a proper way. But they are literally hammering you with the same BS of, we value you. We value you. We value you. Almost like a brainwashing. And it just, what? What? Like that's what the other person said too, with Paul, with your experience. We'll make a one-time exception. That's also a gaslight, you know,
Yeah.
that they have to put in the gaslight to make themselves feel superior to the customer. And I think when you want to be a good entrepreneur, have a good company, you need to make sure that you are authentic with them. Obviously, you don't want to be walked on, like Jason, your point earlier of how can you tell which customers are being honest? Because people will lie to get more stuff from the company, and you will have to deal with that. But I mean, would you rather have more people walking away and feeling, no, I was able to take advantage of them, or have more people walking away being like, oh my gosh, I hate those guys. They do not take good care of their people. Like, which would you prefer? Would you prefer to lose a little bit of profit for those people, for more people walking away with positive, even if they took advantage of you, or would you rather walk away with people knowing that you're not letting anyone walk on you, you have to have your pride, and people might walk away feeling like they were robbed?
Mm.
I think especially the problem becomes, I'm not sure if that's true. The lifetime value of the customer,
Mm.
I think, needs to be considered in these moments, because, you know, like a security camera system, if I have all of my history of security camera stuff on your system, I'm not going to leave it. It's too much of a pain to leave. If one camera broke, I'm just going to replace that camera. You'll have me for the next decade. I might buy
Yeah.
more stuff from you. However, if now my base station, which holds the whole system together, doesn't work, and I'm going to buy a new camera anyhow, it's like, well, I could just now move. Right now I'll just draw a line in the sand. I'll get something else.
Yeah.
And that's just me. So I think the you know, to everybody's point, is a person being truthful? How do you determine that? And if they are, how fast can you solve their problem so they don't have to question their own sanity? And and uh, and also, there's got to be some sort of calculation in there. What can a customer service person do? And how do you distribute that to a team that might be remote? You know, this person, I have no idea where this person's at. who's sending me emails back and forth.
Mhm.
They're following some script someplace, and she knows she's authorized to do $20. I guarantee she's never talked to anybody else about it.
Well,
I
I
have
think
something to follow up on that, but Ryan, what do you say?
I say most companies, um, most companies' business model is customer centric, which means if there's a problem, I mean, likely higher ups above customer service people have thought about the lifetime value of a particular customer, especially when it comes to subscription services. So taking care of the customer should be paramount. Also depends on the type of company as well. But I being I haven't had experience in customer service and account management as well as in sales. Um, it's easier for me to understand that there are some limitations that companies do have in which they have to treat some cases differently than others. And I definitely think the gaslighting that some of you have described doesn't necessarily come from, may not necessarily come from a company directive, but for the individual themselves not looking stupid. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that the one where it's like, okay, we'll do this one time for you as a special case or something like that. To me, that screams, I fucked up, but this is how I'm going to reconcile that without letting you see that I was an idiot.
Yeah.
Rather than it being like, I want to theme some sort of way in front of my customer. Um, Kind of sounds the same, but I think it's more about the embarrassment of being wrong in the first place. It's kind of like if you're checking IDs for any sort of institution or a company, and someone gives you an ID that you think is fake, but it actually isn't. It's just not an ID that you've seen before. Um, to take that one step further, that happens a lot to Puerto Ricans. Like apparently a lot of people in the continental United States don't think their IDs are valid US, national type of IDs. My point is that people make mistakes all the time. And whether it's in a customer service sort of environment or something else, you have to take that into consideration when someone makes a mistake in your case and they try to rectify it without them seeming like they made a mistake. It's kind of like I go in there with the mindset of like, look, I'm just trying to be solutions oriented. Let's just fix this and I can be on my way. That's basically it. And then assuming that things don't go as I hoped, I think to Jason's point, it's really important to consider what that word of mouth looks like once that resolution has come to pass, whether it's negative for the customer or positive for the customer. Because at the end of the day, that customer is going to talk about their experience, and likely they'll remember it more if it was a negative one. Um, Often they talk about those negative experiences more than they talk about the positive ones. So, from my point of view, coming from that environment in the past, I often approach my customer service calls with more of a solutions oriented um, sort of perspective. Because at the end of the day, I know that these people, regardless if they're chatting with me on email, which I have thoughts about that, or over text or on the phone, I know that those are just people on the other side. And whether they might be in a place like New York and being paid X amount of money, or in a place like Bangladesh being paid X amount of money, this is something that they go through all the time. So it's a little more, I guess, my perspective is a little bit different. So because I've been in that situation.
All right,
Yeah,
Naomi,
I
I
remember.
cut you off there. Oh,
Oh,
sorry,
yeah,
Jason.
sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Natalie.
I don't know what I was gonna say.
Oh,
Sorry,
so
should
I
No,
bring
you're
I
good.
took all the air, like all the air out the room.
I took so I used to ship heating and air conditioning products across the country and sometimes the world. And that, like, there's a lot of technical support involved in there. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of damages and all sorts of stuff. And one of the issues was, people might break their stuff. because they were intent on putting it in a certain way that was, they didn't read the manual and all sorts of stuff. And it's expensive to ship, we're not just talking about little plastic box and nothing. It's expensive to ship an air conditioner and a furnace across the country. And it's sometimes very expensive and problematic to find a replacement part to send.
Yeah.
And so, we ended up with situations where we started recording every call, because people would call back and say, you definitely told me that you had to do such and such. And we're like, oh, well, I guess we'll have to look up the phone call for that. We'll get back to you. And then we go to the original phone call and listen to the recording of the original phone call, where we're like, no, definitely you're not going to need we always we had to prove our rightness to then go tell the customer, we know you lied to us. We're not taking care of this. This is your problem now. And in many cases, in many cases where we had to go do that, it really was the customer trying to lie to us.
Yeah.
And it was the evidence that saved that interaction. And it would have been super expensive to, sorry, had to blow in a sneeze.
Bless you.
It would have been super
you.
expensive to fix that issue, and the lifetime value of that customer, you're only going to buy one air conditioner, one furnace from us. We're never going to see you again. And it's going to be a long, long time. So it's not like one of those, an item that you might reuse all the time, like toothpaste or something like that. All those reusable items, there's a number, if you're not satisfied with with this product, we're going to replace it right now. You just call the number, boom, you have a coupon in your email right then and there.
Yep.
Because they don't want to have a discussion. It's super inexpensive. It's super expensive to have the discussion, super inexpensive to just take care of it, because we know you're going to buy this product next month again. And like, talked about, you're going to tell all of your friends.
I remember.
So it's interesting to how do you build those policies? What decision do you go through to build a policy that is functional for your customer, solves their problem as fast as you possibly can with as few questions as you possibly can, and also protects who cares if you lose money on that one person? You're not going to lose money on their second order or all the people that they're going to tell. You will 100% lose money if they start bad mouthing your company to all of their friends and family.
Mhm.
I used to work at Yelp, and that was always the issue for business owners.
Yeah.
And I think one thing also to keep in mind as well while you're dealing with people in customer service is that these jobs, so here's a little anecdote. I've been looking to change my day job from what I originally did when I met you all, which was like high value sales, like SaaS, like really business to business stuff, to going back to like dealing on a B2C level, customer service. And I'm doing that because it just gives me more brain space to kind of to cultivate my business that I'm creating, the skincare business. And so I'm looking at these qualifications, and I'm well overqualified at this point in my life to many of these positions. And I think about the person who does apply for these positions and then what they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I'm just like, I was like, it's almost like there's no pity. Well, you almost want to pity some of these people because, let's assume like you're working for Comcast and you're dealing with people who are unsatisfied all the time, or some company like of that type of that has that type of action. And you can only imagine what some of these people go through. And as I look at some of these qualifications for positions like this, their minimum qualifications are like high school graduate, can type 35 words per minute and so forth. So you can only imagine that the type of people who take these jobs are either, in on the ground floor of whatever their career is, or it's their second job or something like that. Or, in some cases, they're probably all off in a different country and English is their second language. So again, this is just my perspective because I've been in this business. But I, I, I often try to show a perspective of empathy, but at the same time, to Jason's point, like I want the issue resolved as quickly as possible. So if there's a point where I feel like I'm not getting what I need from whoever I'm dealing with, I immediately escalate. Like, "Oh, okay, so you're not, you don't have the authority to authorize this decision that we're trying to make here. Let's go ahead and transfer this up to your manager, or let's escalate this. Here's my phone number. Can you call me back, or so forth." Um, I think that perspective to have is really important from the from the customer's end, because I've definitely been on those calls where I've had people ultra frustrated and they yell at you. And I've listened to those calls where I've heard people make other people cry and stuff like that. It's intense. And I think with my business moving forward, I definitely want to be as customer centric as possible, because lifetime value of a customer, they're not, if they like the service that they've gotten, they're going to buy over and over, and they're going to tell 3 or 4 or 5 of their friends. On the other hand, if the service that they get based on a problem that they're dealing with isn't up to par for them, they're going to, depending on how bad it was and how much they want to take it, they may even try to shut down your company. So that's just kind of where I come from.
I remember when
Yeah.
I was oh,
Go ahead, Namu.
I was to answer that question, I feel like the dilemma that there is how can you maintain that level of customer service where they feel satisfied and also be able to not be lied to by your customer, and all like how do you know? And um I think a good line to draw, Jason, like to I think I was answering that question earlier is the well, with what you did with Wise sending the evidence, I think if they have I mean, obviously you don't want to like make exceptions for people who may be lying to you. Like you don't want to have to, but sometimes you need to, for like I said, more positive experiences. But I think a good rule of thumb for a company is, hey, they're sending evidence, they have evidence that this did happen. I think it's always good to trust that, and that should be an immediate escalation within the customer service side of it of, hey, I can't do this. I see you have evidence. Let me send that up. I think there should be some kind of policy put in place with that so that people are feeling like they're getting taken care of. They're being respectful. They're also advocating for themselves. And then the customer service rep is also feeling like, oh, I don't have this authority. Let me tell them that, but also acknowledge that they had this and not just say this templated thing. You know what I mean? Like, I love that, Ryan, you were saying that if you can tell that they're not authorized to make that decision, you ask for somebody above them. Like, I think that they should be in a position too on their level where they are ready to ask for the person above them too in order to advocate for the client who is prepared with evidence to support their claim.
And
Absolutely.
I
I think,
go ahead.
just to agree with Naomi real quick, I completely agree with you. I mean, there's often been times when I'm in a position where I can't make the decision, like
Yeah.
a decision of whatever caliber that is. So I'm just immediately like, okay, I'm going to place you on a brief hold, and I'm going to refer to somebody, talk to somebody, escalate this. And I hope that most companies have that type of policy in place as well. But at least I've been fortunate enough to work at companies that did.
I think too, there's going to be the situation of who the management is because sometimes managers, they don't want to get bugged. So the people who are under them who can't make those decisions, but the manager can, the manager's going to make them feel like crap for asking them. And so that person is like stuck between a rock and a hard place between wanting to help the customer and wanting to not get fired or being pegged as the annoying employee.
Well, that was kind of my two things that because that was kind of one of my thoughts. I was thinking the other side of it, that a lot of the escalation behind the scenes, in my experience with customer service, is when it's escalated. It's not like, hey, I just need another set of eyes on this. It's this customer's being pain. Because the customer service rep doesn't want to be in a place of like we said, like I've messed this up. It's always like we have to somehow assign blame just to be able to move things through processes. I don't know why. It's a human characteristic. And so behind the scenes, there might be resistance to escalation because that customer service rep wants to be seen as competent. And to create the competence or the vision, the idea of competence, they need it to get to a point almost where it's like, this customer's out of control, so I'm going to have to pass it to you. It wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
When in fact it's like, well, you're just doing your job. I get it. You have limited authority the wise thing, you have limited authority to do anything. I get it. So I'm going to ask you to escalate this, and you take my one example, back to your idea, Paul. It's like, take this one. I get it. I'm the outlier. That's where you need to escalate it. I don't fit the norm. And if I do fit
Yeah.
the norm, you should have a process. You should have a process through this already that doesn't result in frustration.
Yeah. I actually have I never realized how formative it was for me when I worked in telephone customer service. I went and did it in the United Kingdom as well. And the British are notorious for terrible telephone customer service. I remember I would overhear conversations. I'm thinking, you could not get away with that back in the States. You would be in such hot water if you did that. But anyway, one story comes to mind, sort of straddling the line there between what Naomi said and what you just said, Jason, is that I was dealing with a customer one day and I had the ownership mentality, right? Even then, I was like, I own this. I can fix this. I don't need to escalate because I can see what the problem is. And I've watched my supervisors fix it enough times to know how to do it. I also knew, based on how they were starting to get a little bit, this customer was starting to get a little bit agitated, that if I escalate this, there's a good chance I'm going to send it up to, I'm looking over at the supervisor table. I can see who's manning the phones. I'm like, those people are going to F this up if I send it to them. They're going to be obnoxious, the way a lot of English customer service people are. And American customer service, can fix this. So they said, I'd like to speak to a supervisor, please. And I said, you happen to be speaking to one now. Even though technically they weren't. I said, what can I do? And she said, this is the problem. And I said, okay, I'll fix that. And I got it fixed for her. And she went away. And I never told anybody that I had just basically impersonated a manager.
Well, you did know. You're gonna get in trouble now.
I know I'm in trouble now. The other thing that another time, I was being a little bit like short-sighted with what this guy was telling me, and he was, complaining, the way the Brits do. It's funny to listen to them. That's why I stayed on the line with him. But eventually, I said, I think I see what your point is here. I think I apologize. I've been myopic on this, and I didn't realize that I didn't look at it from that angle. Now that I see that, I think I can fix this. And that time, I actually, eventually an email made its way down to me, forwarded from my supervisor, where the man said, I want to feed back to you on the way Paul Edwards dealt with my complaint. He listened, he took responsibility, he apologized when he was wrong, he fixed the problem. Why don't you have more people like him working at your company? Now, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, even though I am.
Right.
Right. I wanted to see how Naomi would react to that one. But it does influence today, like philosophically, like an emissary, right? I tell the team, here's the minimum acceptable benchmark. That client has exactly the work they want, published when they expect it, in the manner they expect it. They're not correcting grammar. They're not correcting stupid clerical mistakes. If they're unsatisfied with how we've approached the angle of the content, okay, fine. We take it back. We fix it. We give it right back to them the way they want it. But I've explained this over and over and over again to the team till they're just automated on it, right? They know what the expectation is, and they deliver it week after week after week. And the clients don't look at it. They just, oh, great. It's good. Okay. Send me the invoice. I think of course, that's easier to do with a small team. It gets harder and harder to do the larger you get. But I think one of the things that probably doesn't happen wise, probably does happen at a company like T-Mobile, is they take the time to explain it over and over and over and over again. Because you can't over communicate when it comes to effective communication with your customers. You have to be willing. When I say you can't over communicate, I mean internally with the people you're working with. You cannot overemphasize what are those priorities, right? What's the priority? The priority is the customer gets what they're expecting and paying a lot of money to receive. If they could do it themselves, they wouldn't come to us. But they can't, or they won't, or they don't have time, or they don't know how. So here we are to do it for them. So let's make sure that they get on par with their expectations if they knew how to do it for themselves. And then, if there are qualms about certain things, yes, of course we'll fix them. But let's not let them catch us doing stupid or being neglecting simple details. Let's let them catch us instead with an angle that they're not really. I don't know if I'm comfortable coming at it that way. Okay, then we have a good level discussion between two parties that are seeking to cooperate for each other's benefit.
I think that goes in the miscommunication I think that happens is when there's inconsistency. I think a company that will make exceptions here or there or will be consistent based off of who's managing that day. Nothing that the employees, the further down employees can actually rely on. And so things either get lost in translation or they are playing a guessing game with, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this solved with this person if I do go to this person for it, if I do go to my higher up. And so I think I was reading the book, The Power of Habit, and there was I don't remember what the company was, but the biggest thing that they emphasized was consistency across the board to the point where there was somebody who was a well-known manager within the company who made a mistake, and there wasn't a single employee, whether high up or one of the most in m- most vast, what's it called? Just like the
Entry
lower
level.
down, yeah, entry level employees who didn't know exactly what was going to happen to this person, even though they had an outstanding reputation. They neglected to share information that was vital to a system that they had. And everyone knew, there wasn't a doubt in anyone's mind that that person would get fired, regardless of their high reputation in the company. There was no doubt. And he even knew going into the meeting with his superior that he was going to get fired. And it wasn't an unkind thing. It wasn't a lack of fairness. There wasn't any animosity about it. He knew what the policy was because there was so much consistency across the board. There wasn't favoritism. There wasn't nepotism. It was just policy, consistent policy of here is how we run things, clean and neat and simple. And that's it. And so it wasn't a matter of whether or not someone was being kind. It was a matter of whether or not they could be consistent. And that's something that employees can rely on the company for, and then the customers can rely on the employees and company for it as well.
Good
Yeah.
word.
Well, we're coming up on the end of our hour here. This spreads into all sorts of thoughts in my mind about decision trees and calculations, and how do companies, what tools do they use or can use to create consistently above average customer service, in the fringe cases, in the outliers, because that's, I think, where you make or break a lot of your value creation. And I've got this thought in my mind. I might toy around with it just a little bit. How do you create this? Because I think it's important. I think, and the more distributed our teams get, I think the harder it is to create a high quality customer service team, because you're no longer, the customer service teams don't even know each other. They're distributed across the world. They meet over video, if ever. And so the culture, it's hard to create culture. And
Yep.
so I think you get spotty customer service, even with well-meaning people. And I think the vast majority of people on the planet are well-meaning. So anyhow, it's a really good discussion. Maybe worth follow up. Any final words anybody wants to give us as we close this out?
I'm good.
I think we said it all. We solved the
Okay,
world's
good.
problems once again.
Yes. World
Yeah.
peace. It's happening tomorrow because of this meeting.
Yes, as usual.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, this has been the workshop. Happens every Tuesday with faculty members here from Thinker Growth Community for entrepreneurs. If you've got questions and you need answers to become a better entrepreneur, this is your moment. Every Tuesday, drop it in the community, and we'll see you here next Tuesday. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.